Hey guys, in this tutorial, we are going to see how to use jQuery to connect with RESTful APIs and drive the user interface. So we will be checking in all our code into the employee REST repository, uh, the link of which is given over here. Now, what is jQuery? So Um, you have your JavaScript, right? So we learned a little bit of JavaScript in our previous tutorials. And just like in Java, you have libraries that do a lot of things for you, and you simply have to invoke those functions. Similarly, jQuery is a JavaScript library on top of Java, so JavaScript, that gives you predefined functions to do a lot of things. Primarily, people use jQuery uh, for few things, uh, interacting with the UI, uh, basically take action. Take certain, let's say, actions based on user actions, like mouse over, clicking on a button, etc. Uh, then changing UI. All right, so let's say using your REST, you fetch some data and you want to update the user interface. And then finally, making AJAX calls, right? So AJAX is nothing but making JavaScript based calls to your REST APIs and fetching data, updating data, etc. etc. We saw in the last tutorial that if I look at my index.html, in the last tutorial we were learning about Bootstrap, but Bootstrap also uses jQuery to do certain things, and this is how we had included our jQuery, right? And so once you have it, jQuery gives you a handle called dollar. So you can do dollar dot, let's say x. You can invoke a method uh, x or y or z on jQuery object that is represented by a dollar. Uh, so just like you would do something like var x equal to 100, right? And then you can do something on x, right? Similarly, dollar symbol is like a variable given to you by jQuery script, and then you can invoke methods on it. An important thing about jQuery is selectors, right? So let us see. Let me just run my project. I think it's already there. So let's go to localhost 9000 slash employee, right? So let's say I want to take certain actions on this add button, but first I need a handle to this add button. And a jQuery gives you something called selectors to get access to this, right? So you can use ID, name, you can use tag tag names, etc., right? So if I do dollar and then p selects all paragraph, right? Or if I get hash some ID, I get access to a single element in the document that is the ID, all right, and so on and so forth. So all of these things inside the brackets are called selectors, right? You can also select a whole bunch of things and get handle to them using some class. It's a CSS class. Okay, so now that we have it, so I have my script over here, all right, and I don't want to be coding inside it because otherwise it will increase my code base. So let's just include. We already have an app.js over here. We'll modify it later. Let's just include our app.js. All right, and we don't need all of these, so I'll just keep my app.js inside it. And I'm just going to remove all of these things. All right, and I want to associate some function with the on-click method of add, right? So let's say I can say function add employee, all right, and JQuery. If I look at JQuery, I have a $document ready function. So I can do something like $document. Hang on, $document dot ready, and I'll call init, and then I have a function init. All right. So, and I'll just say over here alert initialized. Okay, and so what's happening over here is jQuery. So document is like a default variable given by JavaScript. So here we are telling to jQuery that hey, uh, for the document, when it's ready, when everything is loaded, call the init function. And we had seen earlier in earlier tutorials that you can pass functions to other functions in JavaScript, and that gives us a lot of advantage. It can make coding a little bit of nightmare, but it also gives you a lot of power. So let's just load this and see what happens. All right. So I do this and I get initialized. So far so good, everything worked. Now for our add button, let's add an ID. All right, so I'll just add an ID and add employee. Okay, so this is the ID given to this button, and now in my init method I can use the jQuery selector $hash, right, add employee dot on click. I hope I'm doing it right, and I'm saying call the add employee method. Okay, and here I'm going to remove this alert and I'm going to say adding employee. Right, so let's see if this is correct. jQuery button on click. I just want to see if I did it correctly. Oh, it's click. Yeah, so dot click, right? Okay, and let's run this again. Okay, and sometimes it's also good to open the debug mode and console so that if there are any JavaScript issues, we'll come to know of it. So it looks like nothing, and now if I click add, it says adding employee. The next step will be, oh well, it's submitted it. So how do I prevent? I think maybe I need return false over here. we'll we'll look at this later. Anyway, so now the next step is that I want to get the data from this form and then convert it into JSON and send to the server. Okay, so the way to do this is that I can create a Ajax call, and this is how you do this. All right, I'll explain it to you. So I'm saying $.ajax. I'm telling jQuery to make an Ajax call, and URL I think it would be /API. Type method call was post. Okay, and then I need to define my form data, or data is JSON, correct? So where JSON equal to, we'll just say empty string right now, and then on success some function, and then I can say that on error I'll give one more function. All right, and here I'll just say alert an error has occurred. Okay, so what am I doing over here? So remember that we have a JSON notation, all right, and in JavaScript you can use this same notation to define various variables. So I'm saying, hey, URL is API, type is post, data I'm going to submit some JSON, and then on success I'm giving it a function on error. So Ajax method will take all of these mappings, it will make Ajax calls, it will underneath use XML HTTP request that we had seen in the earlier tutorial, and then based on the various responses that it gets, either the success or error method will be invoked. And let's just say over here alert form employee created, right? We'll just say employee created, and the final thing is now we need this JSON, right? So again we want a handle to the form, right? So we don't need any of these things right now, we can remove them, and we are moving all of these things to JavaScript, and I need an ID. I'll call it employee form. So first of all I need a handle to it, so I'll say where employee form equal to dollar employee form. So I've gotten the handle to the form, right? Excuse me, and I need to construct my JSON out of it. So let's just search form to JSON, JavaScript, all right, serious form to JSON. Okay, all right, so they're saying dot serialize object and console dot log form data. We'll see if this works. So I'll just say something like this and console.log JSON, all right, and let's just return from here for the time being, right? We'll not execute this. It's just we're just trying to debug things first. Okay, so I'll refresh so that my JavaScript loads. I'll say 1 RJ23 and add. um, I think the form got submitted, and what's the reason for it? Let me debug this. Okay, so I debugged the code and made some changes. Let me tell you all of that. So first of all, we also need the name attribute in all of the inputs. Okay, um, and that's the first thing. Second thing was that I had button. Uh, I think it was type equal to submit. I changed it to type equal to button. So pay careful attention to this. The third thing is that I created this method to JSON, right? So it takes a JQuery um, object. So how do I get the jQuery object? I get where dollar $form equal to, I get the handle to the object, and then I'm passing this object to the to JSON method, and there is a method called form.serializeArray, right? And just for your visibility, I'm logging it, and then I'm using this code to convert this entire code. First of all, to create a data holder object and then populate that object and then converting that into JSON and then finally logging the JSON. And so if you have the JSON, we can then try to post. Uh, so, um, so let me just try to run this, right? Now, so let's refresh. I'll add ID as 3, name as let's say RJ, age is 30, and add. And so see, basically what has happened is uh, here when I did form.serializeArray, right, this method gave me key value pairs, so name value pairs rather, so ID3, but this is not a JSON format, right? And so I used this bit of code, and then there's a method called json.simplify. This is a JavaScript provided method. Then I created my JSON. All right. So let me just open up my MySQL workbench. Oh, okay. So now, moment of truth. We will remove this method, and we will try to post this JSON uh, to our API and see what happens. So stopping my service, restarting it. So 3RJ30. We already have some data, so I don't have anything with ID3. So let's try this. $.ajax is not a function. Maybe I need to use $ajax. So the bug is that previously I was using some other jQuery version, which is slimmin, and uh, this does not contain Ajax methods. So this is what am using, and I got this from the jQuery website. I just included this URL in my code, and so if you look over here, I don't have an employee with ID3. So I go over here, I have 3RJ30 and I add it, and I get employee created message, which is coming from my JavaScript file over here, success. And if I look at my database, I get RJ into my database. So this is how we make an Ajax call. Now we want to be able to create these rows dynamically, right? Um, so we will first delete all the rows that are present, then fetch the data, and then populate the rows again. So let's add a button over here. Uh, let's say refresh. So refresh data. I just call it refresh. And in our JavaScript, we can have a function called refresh. Okay, and yeah, or let's say we can just call it get employee list. All right, and so here I want to say that on click of this button, which is refresh data, okay, call the get employee list method. Okay, now what do I want to do? I want to invoke a get method. All right, I'm not passing any data to it, and let's put all of these to console.log. Okay, we just want to notify when an error has happened. So employee data fetched, and let's just also do console.log response. All right, just to see what we get. Okay, so I'll again do maven jetty run. I'm not seeing my button over here. That's weird. Should be here. Uh, okay. Let's look at the code. It has not been picked up. All right. Save this and run it again. I see my refresh button. That's not looking nice. So let's put a space for future and then PSP semicolon. And let's run this first. So I do get all my data. All right, ID, name, and I want to iterate over this. Okay, as you can see, JQuery has already converted into a list of objects. So okay, so let's have a function again. Okay, to display this data, display employee list, and it takes a list. So first of all, we need to clear what is already there. So remember that in our table we have this t body. Okay, let's just call it id equal to table, or let's say employee rows. Okay, I can get a handle to it by saying employee rows, and I just researched on the internet. I think you need to call the empty method. This should remove uh, all the rows inside the t body. Okay, now for employee in list, or maybe we need to do where employee list. We need to create a row. Okay, so the way to do that is should be here. All right, that's how you do it. So we'll create the row, and then inside the T body we will append the row. Excuse me. And I think we need three things, one, two, three, four things. So tr, what is the first one? ID. So we will do, we'll just, let's call this e dot id. Then we'll call e dot name, right? Then we also need, okay, plus e dot h plus, okay, let's format this nicely. Uh, so okay, uh, uh, okay, so we get age, and then we need, uh, let's say, edit or delete buttons. Okay, we will update this later. All right, so let's see if this works. If it doesn't, then I might need to debug it, and I'll get back to you. So refresh. Don't think it worked. Um, should be a minor glitch. Let me just fix this and get back to you. Okay, so fix the bugs. First of all, I was not calling the display employee list method after the success response that we obtained. The second thing is that I was not able to get a handle to T-body. I was doing this, excuse me, uh, while debugging. So what I did was that in my table, I removed the ID from here and added the ID over the table. And I used JQuery method to get the handle to the table, and then the find method that JQuery provides to get handle to the T-body. And then uh, I was basically the index, not the employee object directly. So I obtained the employee. So data I, just normal array stuff. And then I created a row. Basically, I updated this code or formatted this code to look more beautiful. I guess that's basically it. And then I call the append method. And so let me refresh this page. Oh, I don't have it running. Let me just run this. Okay, refresh. And now if I call the refresh method, so see, it's showing me all the employees. So let's now try to do like a proper thing. I add an employee, let's say 10. Let's call it incref employee, and age is 60. And I add it, and then if I refresh it, I get my incref employee 10. Now the edit and delete method, I'll leave edit for now. Let's look at the delete method. So let's say there is a function let's keep all our Ajax methods at the same place. So delete employee, and this is going to be a little tricky. Let me think over it, how to do it, and get back to you. Okay, so you can do this in multiple ways. The design that I've chosen is that instead of now edit and delete buttons, edit is like slightly more tricky. We can ignore it for the time being for the purpose of learning. But I created a button HTML. So I created a button, and on click, uh, we are saying that on click call the delete employee method over here, and I'm passing e.id, and then while constructing the row in my last column, I'm just inserting this button HTML. Okay. Uh, Notice how quotes are getting used. In JavaScript, generally, it's not recommended to use double quotes because double quotes are sort of used for using on attributes like on click, etc. And so here I'm using quotes. Well, I mean, ideally, we should be doing this. Let me just fix it everywhere. Okay. So, all right. So, and I mean, and so and so forth, right? We should be using single quotes over here, all right? But anyway, and so my double quotes are properly formatted in my HTML. I will show what this results into. And then remember we have our do delete method. It's taking request.get parameter ID. So I'm constructing the URL as do API question mark ID and passing it on the ID, and then type as delete, and then logging and all of these things. All right. So let's save this, run it again. Okay, now refresh this page, refresh the table. So I'm getting all my data nicely, and then I have my delete button over here. Let's inspect this and see what we get. So basically we are getting 2 employee 30, and then I'm getting button on click equal to delete employee with the ID 2, and if I delete this, I get on my console employee deleted, and if I refresh this, I get this thing. Finally, I don't want to be refreshing my UI again and again, and so we can do a couple of things. After adding an employee, we can just call get employee list, so it refreshes automatically. After deleting, we can again call this method, and maybe I can also call, after doing this, I can also call get employee list. So after the page loads, maybe maybe I get automatically all my employees. Let's see if this works. So let's refresh this. Right now, just on loading the page, everything works. If I delete an employee, everything works properly. Let's add an employee with, let's say, 3 or 5. Let's say Romil Jan. Oh well, by the way, let's see if everything is going on into the database also. Yes, I have 3 employees over here. Age 30, add, and so employee gets added. It's in the database, and I refresh this. So this is how you can create an application. There's lots to learn in terms of interacting with Ajax, a lot of syntactical things, uh, like using code, lot of tricks that you need to use, like dynamically creating HTML and appending it. But it's all like just a lot of fun once you get hang of it. Tricks like how to convert a form into JSON that can be sent to the server. Uh, but that's the beauty of user interface. Once you really get well practiced and you get hang of these things, it really becomes very amazing. Um, as of update, uh, again, we have not implemented the update method fully, right? If you look at our code, it is still under implementation, but I don't want to cover it right now, because once we get onto Spring, all of these things become much more easier. So I will start the Spring tutorials after this, and once we are able to update things there in the backend, then I will complete the UI part for update as well. Uh, let's try something funky. So let's say if I already have an ID 5, and 5 is a primary key, so database should throw an exception. And if I try to add this again, right, I get an error as append. And if you, I mean, like all of these edge cases can be handled much more nicely in Spring, that the ID already exists. So instead of showing an error has occurred, um, you can show all of these. You can show a more user-friendly message that employee with ID already exists, right? But right now everything is getting printed, so on our console, so at least we can debug through this. Okay, I'll fix some uh, grammatical mistakes and check in this code. And remember, you can find this code in github.com in grep employee rest.